talking about fighting, something really fun. But really with fighting, what I mean is arguments between individuals, and specifically within a romantic relationship between partners. And looking at different aspects of this. The most obvious one when we think of arguments is people yelling at each other or having a disagreement that involves raising your voices, getting upset with one another. And so this is a hot kind of a conversation or argument. That's one kind. The other kind is a cold conversation, or what I want to call a cold war, where people don't talk to each other, where they are giving each other, in English might be called the silent treatment, but in Farsi we might say ghar kardan, when you don't talk to each other. And this can be used as a weapon in this Cold War, which is why I wanted to talk about that. So to begin with, yes, we have arguments. If you're in the process of being in any kind of relationship with someone that is close, and a kind of romantic relationship, you have to expect that there will be arguments, disagreements. It is a natural part of any relationship. It's impossible for two people to be close with one another without things coming up that bother one or one another, even unintentionally. So it doesn't mean you are doing something wrong if your partner gets hurt necessarily, but they will be hurt by things you do or don't do. So we want to accept that as a starting point. So if we have that as our starting point, then we hopefully will be open to and okay with our partner sharing things, and actually we would want to know. This is something I've talked about many times on the show, because I think it's so crucial to have this mindset, to realize if you are accepting, as you should, that you will do things that will hurt your partner, that will upset them, and also not do things that maybe they want, then the question really is, would you want to know if you are doing that, or do you not want to know? And hopefully you would think, well, I would want to know if I'm doing something that hurts the person that I'm saying I love so much, that I care for so much. We should actually want to know and feel that it would be better for them to tell us than not to tell us, even though in the moment it doesn't feel good. So it's one of those things, many things in life are like this, that in the moment it doesn't feel good, but it's actually for the betterment of something, either our own physical health or well-being, or the health or well-being of a relationship and our loved one in this case. So we hopefully will want to hear it from them, and these things will come up, and at times they can turn into an argument or into a type of a war. And so the first thing to keep in mind here when we're thinking of bringing something up, using the same language of a war, is if you're going to fire a shot, you're more likely going to create a war than if you approach the conversation in a more soft, gentle, kind manner. So if you attack your partner, what do you expect other than for them to get very defensive and or offensive? They're going to attack you back, tell you why you're wrong, why they didn't do anything wrong, and it almost always is going to end up worse than how it's going to begin. Actually, John Gottman, who's done decades of research on marriages and also looking at how couples interact, has found that generally how a conversation starts is how it's going to end. So if it starts with aggression and nastiness and saying something mean or name calling, then you can be pretty sure it's going to end on a bad note as well. And so if you fire that opening shot, you should expect a war to happen. You can't expect or shouldn't expect your partner is going to just respond with kindness or warmth when you attack them. So if you can bring it up in a more gentle way, that is good. And so we have arguments, they come up, things are going to obviously happen. And now it's what we do with them when they do. So, as I mentioned, some people use the silent treatment as a next step in the process. There's an argument, there's a disagreement, and that's their go-to move to try to win. So sadly, it does become a war where you're trying to win against your partner and be the victor, which never works out for either of you. But that's one of the weapons that people try to have at their disposal. Now, I want to add here that this doesn't mean that taking a break from the conversation when things get heated is not a good idea. It's actually a very, very good idea, and oftentimes the best thing you can do. Because once we get heated and we have our fight or flight system engaged, at that point you are almost completely unlikely to have a positive conversation because you are now more in a mindset of fight or flight. And usually you're in a fight with your partner, that it's not going to go to a good place. So if you feel that you are heated, one or both of you, it can be very good and a very wise thing to say, you know what, we're both getting heated. We're not likely to make things better if we keep talking when we're both in this state of mind. Let's take a little break here. And what I actually recommend is not only to take the break, but make a plan of when you're going to talk or reconvene, which hopefully will be at least 30 minutes to an hour to give both people time to calm down. John Gottman has found also when measuring things like heart rate during arguments that men's heart rate tends to go up higher, and also it takes longer for them to calm down or to get low again. So it could be good to go for a walk, do something to cool off, to allow yourself to calm down, and as I say, allow for cooler heads to prevail. Usually, one, you get to calm down a bit so you can think a bit more clearly, but also with some time to process. Usually you will be more clear about your own feelings, but likely will hopefully also be able to see your partner's side as well in that process of taking some time away. However, what can happen though is I've seen people use this as a type of weapon too, rather than really meaning I want us to take a break to cool down. What they're really doing is they're trying to avoid the conversation. So they could say, oh, we're getting really heated, so we should stop talking and let's talk about this later. And later turns out to be something like never. So it's kind of like the ghar kardan, or the silent treatment that I'm going to talk about, but it's in a different way. It's just to avoid the conversation altogether. So it might not even be in a passive aggressive way of saying, I'm going to make you feel bad by not talking to you. They might actually talk about all other things and act normally, but they're using this as an avoidance to never come back to the topic. And then if the person brings up the conversation, they might say, I'm still not ready. So it still has a similar theme of avoiding talking about it, which happens when we use the silent treatment, but it's doing it in a slightly different way, making it seem like first we need a break to calm down, and then using it as a tool that, I want to make sure we have the right time to talk about it, or I'm not in a good mood to talk about it, which are important things, but we can be using that as an excuse. Sometimes when I'm working with couples, in a matter of 2 weeks, 3 weeks, they'll say, we didn't have time to talk about this issue. And I know, obviously, life is busy. If you have kids, it can make it even more busy and have harder demands as far as when to have the time to talk in private. You obviously don't want to have a serious conversation in front of your kids about your marriage. So it's understandable, it makes it harder. But to say you don't have time in a few weeks, well, if that's the case, then your marriage is probably doomed to begin with. But more than likely, you actually do have the time. You are just both, or one of you at least, is avoiding the conversation so it doesn't happen, which is understandable. They're not pleasant conversations, so we avoid them, but we want to make sure we face those unpleasant things because that's what allows our relationship to stay healthy and to grow. But now we get to the silent treatment, which is often used it could be by both members actually, but sometimes only one member is using that. And this is a type of a passive-aggressive approach to communication, or really we shouldn't even say communication because there's a lack of communication, but it's a way of trying to use silence as a passive-aggressive type of a technique. Which sounds strange because silence sounds like you're doing nothing, but it is a passive-aggressive way, and it definitely is a weapon in this Cold War, or creating a Cold War between you and your partner. So essentially what you are doing is a few things. One is that you're saying, I am hurt by you, so I don't want to talk to you, and I don't want to even communicate with you. Another thing that tends to come up in these types of reactions is the person who talks first, or if I approach you, in some way I'm acknowledging wrongdoing, which this point I want to make very clear is definitely not the case. If you have a disagreement, an argument, a bad interaction with someone, the person that comes forward is not acknowledging they did something wrong. You're just acknowledging that there's something between the two of you that's not good. There's been a disagreement, there's been a rupture in the connection, in the relationship, there's some type of bad feelings between both of you. So to come forward doesn't mean you're saying, I was wrong, that's why I'm coming forward. It's, I care about you and I care about our relationship, so I'm coming forward. And you don't have to even necessarily start with an apology. it probably will be in there, but it doesn't have to necessarily be I'm sorry is the first thing you say, because that does become part of the dynamic that some people use with the silent treatment is I'm never going to approach you and you have to come say sorry to me, and then even with some additional punishments, and you have to say how bad you were and wrong you were, and I'm probably not going to acknowledge anything on my side, but then maybe we can be good again. So we shouldn't feel that approaching someone after an argument means you are the loser, that you were wrong, or that you're saying it was your fault. You're just saying, I care enough about you that I want us to talk, to connect, and to work on this, to be able to make things better between us. So it's not something that we have to think of makes us wrong or bad. But so using the silent treatment is a way of also trying to almost starve the person of your love and of your connection. So it's, I'm going to be cold to you, and cold to you no matter what is happening, because essentially saying what you did was so wrong and so bad that it's not even worthy of me talking to you. And so basically they're trying to suck the oxygen out of the relationship, out of the room, and hoping that you eventually start to almost suffocate because you can't handle not getting that attention, or not getting that love, not feeling that the person is close to you, all those types of things. Maybe even brings up fears of losing the person or the relationship, or just that tolerance of how are we going to go on. You know, we have to go to that dinner party, or this thing is coming up, I have to make things right before my family comes in town, whatever it might be. But the person who's using the silent treatment is using it as a type of Cold War tactic that I'm going to essentially force you to have to come to me and apologize. And so, of course, just by making it a aggressive technique that you're using to resolve a conflict, we should think is something that obviously will be harmful and negative for the interaction in some way. So if you use this, it's something to think about. Am I someone who uses the silent treatment as a weapon in my relationships and how I communicate with others? And if you have a partner that does, it's also something to think about. And so after the break, I'll talk a bit more about the reasons why we do this, why it happens, and what we can try to do to overcome it. And also, if you do have a partner that does use this, what you can possibly do to try to make things better. So let's go to our first commercial break. Studio number 310-441-0555. We'll be right back. Back. So in the first segment I was talking about the use of the silent treatment, in Farsi called ghar kardan, which is a unfortunate common technique that often is used. And going back to how it's even coming about, very often it's modeled for us. So we see it in our home. Maybe you saw a parent use this tactic and technique, and so as a result you use it to try to get things to go your way, or you think it's a good way to handle things if you're upset or angry, or to make the other person understand your pain, or at least give you what you want or you think that you want. So I was saying before the break, there's a few ways this tactic we can say works, in the sense that I wouldn't say its work isn't healthy for the relationship, but obviously people employ it because they think it can be good. And so you're essentially trying to hurt your partner, almost starve them to the point where they want to connect or communicate with you. And so this is why it's a passive aggressive type of communication, because you're not talking and you're not communicating, but you are being aggressive still by neglecting your partner or neglecting to talk to them. And so if you are using this technique, you might be aware of what you're doing. Oftentimes people, when they're doing it, they don't use this type of language. They'll probably say it's because I'm so hurt, or what they did was so wrong that I don't want to talk to them. I don't want to even look at them. And after a bad argument, this goes back to what I shared in the previous segment, that at times taking a break can be the best thing you can do. It can be that after a bad fight, or if someone does something very hurtful, a person will need some time to heal or process from that. So if you're someone who's being abusive in some way, whether it's physical or emotionally or verbally abusing your partner, and you have a really bad fight and you do some of those types of things, you shouldn't expect that they want to immediately talk about it, or that they're going to immediately forgive you. So that is different from the silent treatment, using it as a tactic. People can, of course, genuinely be very hurt by their partner and someone and need some time to heal. So there can be moments where this is a different thing than using it as a weapon, the silent treatment. It could really be someone is very hurt and in pain and needs some time. And especially, we shouldn't think that just because we said sorry, we should be forgiven instantly and they're ready to talk about it. Sorry is a aspect or one part of reconciliation, but not a end point. That I've said the word sorry, things are done. And you've maybe seen this where people say, well, I said sorry, so it should be finished. But no, it's an opening. Depending on what you did and what happened, there could be an amount of time that it takes for the person to start to feel better and be okay with talking and getting back in contact and repairing what has happened. But going back to when the silent treatment is used as a weapon, well, then they're trying to make you feel bad so that now you have to come to them, and they're taking very much a me versus you type of a mindset, which always is going to end in against the favor of the relationship and both individuals in that relationship. So we use this in a way to try to get our way because we think it's a better way or an easier way. Now, as I mentioned, if you're a person who your partner does this, you can express to them, we can never control someone's behavior, how much it bothers you that they do this, how much it upsets you that they do this, and see what they say and communicate about it. Once you're talking again, it can make it very, very difficult. Another thing, though, you have to consider. So if you're using the silent treatment as a weapon, I think that's a very bad thing. But we also want to understand in a relationship, communication always involves both individuals. And so there can be things that are going on that you also want to be aware of. If your partner does not talk to you or uses the silent treatment, it could also be because they don't feel that they will be listened to or that you will hear them, or they don't feel like they can communicate with you in a equal way or with equal footing, so they're trying to use a different technique. So maybe you're being aggressive, like blatantly aggressive, so they're using passive aggressive technique to try to level the playing field or give themselves a chance. And I don't want to generalize because both men and women use this technique, but we can see a cultural issue or cultural impact here as well, especially in Iranian relationships where men have generally had more of the power, both in the outside world but also in the realm of relationships. They tend to have a little bit more power in what's going on. So we could understand that it was likely that women would have to use other techniques to try to get their way or to have their say in the relationship. So when we don't have the space and the right to express ourselves, we will try to find other ways to do so. And so the silent treatment, we can understand it developing as a way of trying to level the playing field when we are not given the appropriate access or appropriate rights or the appropriate space to express what we are saying. So that's one cultural development or way to look at these things when we think, well, someone is being, let's say, manipulative. Oftentimes they are, and they're doing it blatantly and very aware of it. But oftentimes forms of what looks like manipulation is that the person has no other choice. So if you're not given the space to talk, not given the opportunity to express yourself, you will try other means. And so this is what I meant, that if you're a partner, first of all, communicate if you don't like that your partner is doing that. But we can also evaluate, is there a way that I don't make it easy for my partner to express themselves to me? Am I giving them the space to tell me what they feel or what's going on for them? Am I overpowering them? No matter what we talk about, I say it's kind of my way or the highway. So if I'm being very aggressive and they can't match my aggression, or maybe even they're choosing not to because they know it'll just get uglier or worse, they might be choosing passive aggressive types of ways of making things more even. In our war, they're using a cold type of tactic to try to balance what is going on. Because I've worked with couples and worked with families where the person stops talking to the one person in the relationship or the family, and they think, see, look, they don't talk and they're silent and they never share anything. And so it could be that they're using this silent treatment as a tactic, or it could be that they recognize talking to you doesn't make a difference. If I share what I think or I feel, you undermine it or you demean it or you don't seem to care. It doesn't change anything. So why should I share what I'm going through, what's going on in my head, how I'm feeling? I'm going to just decide not to talk. So we do have to be aware that the other person in the relationship obviously can play a big factor in how things are happening. I always like to look at things in three ways when you look at a relationship. So both individuals, that's two of the ways. You have your own tendencies, your own personality, your own proclivities of doing things a certain way or another way, how you communicate, how expressive you are, all sorts of things. So each individual in the relationship, that's two of the things we have to look at when we're trying to understand any issue or any concept in the relationship. And then the third one is the interaction between the two people, because obviously we're not going to be the same no matter who we are with. Some aspects might be more stable, but based on how that individual treats us, how they communicate, how they listen, how they talk, all sorts of other factors, that's going to affect how we communicate with them. So the same person that might use the silent treatment with one partner might not use it with someone else. And there are some people that it's a very stable part of who they are, and that's how they'll communicate with essentially anyone, no matter who they are with. So if you're in a relationship with someone using this type of a tactic, you do have to ask yourself, am I doing anything that might make it more likely for them to do this? Am I making them feel heard? The other way this can play out in a kind of opposite of the silent treatment is when people don't feel heard, they at times will explode. And sometimes even people who use the silent treatment, they can use the silent treatment until they then blow up at some other point. Obviously, that's not good either. So it's not to say I'm condoning someone blowing up or getting upset in that way, but it is important for us to look at what is happening. So when I work with families also, this happens a lot with teenagers where they feel that their parents don't listen to them. Now they might just say because they're not giving me what I want, they're not hearing me, but at times it's also because they really don't feel heard by their parents, so they don't tell them much. Or they do tell them something and their parents don't respond, so they say it louder and they say it louder, and eventually they might explode or say it in a very extreme way. So we see this escalation. If I say it at volume 3 and you don't hear me, well, I'll try it at volume 5. And then if you still don't hear me at volume 5, I might go all the way up to volume 10. And so it's not to say it's okay if they're exploding, but we do have to look at, did I hear them when they said it in the lower volume? And again, hearing doesn't mean give them what they want. So if they say something, you have to say yes to the request. But are you making them feel heard and understood and having an actual conversation with whatever it is that they're bringing up? And unfortunately, what can happen, and sometimes when I work with people on the other side of it, if they're blowing up, is it can be painful because they feel like I wasn't understood or heard by them at all. They kept ignoring me or not paying attention, and then all of a sudden I blew up and now I'm the bad guy. I'm the one who did something wrong, and rather than it becoming about what I was upset about, it becomes about the fact that I did something that they didn't like, or I'm the one who said it in a bad way or in a wrong way. And so that becomes the issue at hand rather than whatever it was that I was upset about or not feeling good about being heard by my parent, partner, whoever it might be. So we can see that communication always is a dynamic process involving the individuals who are involved. And so we have to look at the relationship, but each individual has to look at themselves. And so most people won't want to acknowledge they use the silent treatment. They'll probably say others use it, or if they ever have done it, it was because the person deserved it or they didn't know what else to do. And sometimes that can be the case. But I always hope it's good if we can look at ourselves more openly and genuinely to say, okay, what might I be doing? Why might I be doing this? And you can see that maybe you saw it modeled in your home. That's how your mom and dad talked, or one of them talked to the other person or dealt with things. You might also notice that you feel like people don't care what you have to say, or they won't listen to you, or that people might leave you. So you want to put them in a position where they have to try to resolve things, because if things are still not okay, maybe they have to stay around to fix what happened, and I want to make them feel bad. And that's also another thing that people do with the silent treatment. It's a way of trying to show I'm so hurt by what you did. And maybe you were, hurt by them, but hopefully it's something you can let them know, express to them directly how you were hurt rather than showing them over weeks. And that's why it is passive. So rather than saying, look, what you did really hurt me and upset me, I was very shocked that you said that, it hurt my feelings, we're saying, let me let this person find out over the course of a week of me not talking to them that I am upset. And when we make things passive, we even take away in some ways the power from ourselves to directly express what we're feeling, because they might have to try to guess, this is why you were upset, or this is what made you angry. But at the end, they might really not know until you make it clear. And when all this time has passed, now it changes the whole narrative of what is going on. So just like when you explode, it becomes less about the issue at hand and more about what you were doing in this meantime of the silent treatment. You might now get punishment from your partner, or they might get mad at you about how you've not opened up or not talked to them for a week or however long it might be. But we have to understand that the silent treatment is not going to be a part of a healthy relationship. And unfortunately, the reason why I was using the language of Cold War and war is because it is turning things into a winning type of dynamic. How can I win against my partner? How can I get my way or prove that I was right and they were wrong? So sadly, when we go to that approach, we are already creating a lose-lose situation where it can't make things better in the end. It's going to just make things worse. So ask yourself, am I someone who's afraid to express themselves? Do I think it's hard to share my feelings? Also, do I feel like my partner listens to me when I share my feelings? Because if we feel like they don't, you obviously won't feel very comfortable to express yourself or share what you're feeling with your partner and with them. So it could be, again, a dynamic thing to look at. And what I always encourage partners to do is not to just look at the relationships as mine or yours. Yes, they could be coming more from your own individual personality, psyche, things that are going on. But now that that's the case, it's a we issue. So if I have this tendency to go quiet, use the silent treatment, if we want to change that, how do we make that happen together? How can I be more upfront about what I'm saying and not hold things back or go into the silent mode? And also, here are maybe some ways you can make it easier for me to share what I'm thinking or what I'm feeling. It becomes a we type of problem. So we move away from the me versus you in the argument, and we also look at this issue itself as a we. How can we make things better? How can we resolve them and make it so that we can get to a better place with whatever that is? So I just wanted to share some thoughts there about the silent treatment, because it's used so often, unfortunately, in relationships as a way of dealing with arguments, dealing with disagreements, trying to get the power in the relationship, which when we fight for power, we're also going to lose at the end with our partner. But just some thoughts there on that. Let's go to another commercial break. Studio number 310-441-0555. We'll be right back.